This is the Amadon Planet Podcast, episode 68. I'm your host, Joel Amadon. Thank you for joining me on this never-ending quest to figure out how to teach better. Today on the podcast, I am joined by Matthew Mifflin. And Matthew is the musical director of the Amadon Planet Podcast. So when you hear that awesome music at the beginning and end of our episodes, that's from Matt. And he is a artist and songwriter with Phrygian Frog Music Professionals and Phrygian Frog Records, and he's got lots of music that he's been released. He's been on this on the podcast a few times before, and he has become someone who I wanted to share some hot takes with. So I was listening to the Broken Record podcast, one of my favorite podcasts. It's from Malcolm Gladwell, Rick Rubin, and they talk to artists. I think they call it digital liner notes. Liner notes for the digital era. I think that's exactly what it's called. And I was listening to one of their episodes where Rick Rubin is talking with Robert Plant, so the lead singer of Led Zeppelin, and also a recent collaborator with Alison Krauss. And amazing music. And the way he was talking about music and these things that were coming up, I'm walking the dog and I'm having all sorts of different ideas for these parallels between music and teaching and the creative process, because I'm thinking a lot about creativity and teaching lately, and because of one of the books I'm reading, which is How the Arts Can Save Education by Erica Halverson, another episode that we'll talk about. Anyway, so I had a bunch of ideas about parallels between music creation and teaching and the creative kind of endeavors both of them are, and I'm like, I want to talk to, and I knew Matt had some new tracks that he had just released, and I'm like, hey, let's do this, let's put it together, and so that's what this is. It's a little all over the place, but it's some passionate guys talking about music and talking about teaching and some parallels in between them, and kind of influenced by this spark of an episode with the Broken Record podcast by Rick Rubin and Robert Plant. And so excited to share this conversation. It's excited to share Matt's music and it's part of his creative process. And just, here we go. Here's my conversation with Matthew Mifflin. All right, you know what? We're not wasting any more time. Matt Mifflin, we were talking before we hit the record button, but the musical producer of the Amadon Planet podcast, joining me once again. Matt, how are you?
I'm doing great, Joel. I really am. Life has been very good to me. The last couple of years have been fantastic. A lot of things happening and things just continue to happen to almost just open doors for me that I couldn't have imagined them opening for me. And it's been really good. Work has been good. The kids are doing great. Family's doing great. I really have no complaints. The music has been wonderful, and we're just continuing to work and put stuff out. But overall, life is wonderful. I'm very thankful.
Nice. Well, just give an update. So it's been a while since we've talked. Literally. And again, I wanted to hit record as soon as possible because I got a bunch of hot takes on music and teaching I want to throw at you, but just what's one thing that you want to throw out there? One thing hey, kind of we both talk about praise. What's one thing we want to send some praise up for?
Oh man, I want to pray. Oh boy, I got so many. Well, just as far as the music that we're putting out, we just recently put out a single last week called Better Safe Than Sorry.
Nice.
And we've had a couple before that, The Pace and This Too Shall Pass. And things are really starting to flow musically from not only a songwriting standpoint and recording, but also the producing and mixing. I feel like we're really hitting a sweet spot and things are starting to roll and get out faster and sound even, better and better. It seems like we're getting better and better each track that we release. And that's been really cool to experience.
And it seems like, that's a lot of tracks that you talked about. And is that process of, idea, record, mix, is that process accelerating as well? Or are you doing more in that? I don't know, what's going on there?
Well, even just to back it up a little bit, even the songs that I sent to Phrygian Frog record label at the beginning were songs that I had written 7 years ago. So we are putting out songs that I have written years ago. But in the meantime, there has been, I've been recording and writing at home a lot. So we are really, really getting quite a back catalog, if you will.
Nice.
That I look at as a songwriter and quote unquote musician as kind of insurance. We've got things to pick and choose from, and they just it just has a flow to it now where we're really starting to knock out the older songs. That's where we're able to release them a little faster each and every time. But then also we have a lot of songs to look forward to releasing as well. And that's very exciting. It doesn't feel like we're just putting out 6 or 7 songs and then, we'll wait a year and put them out, put another one out. It's going to be a continual kind of thing. It really has been very exciting and a little bit of good, healthy pressure too, to feel like I need to, get my end done better, quicker, faster. And then, even on the end of producing and mixing with Jason, it's just become so organic where we're kind of both on the same page. And it's been really, I'm very excited for, even the next 6 months to the next year of what we're going to be putting out.
So my outlet right now mostly is through writing. I do take that back. I got 3 podcasts. Oh wait, my outlet is podcast, and then I do writing, and so it's, and I guess okay. So let's go to the podcast side. With podcasts, it's like I get excited about the podcast and having this conversation. Want to have this conversation, and then it's like I put it together, do the opening and close, and that process has gotten pretty quick. And then you put that out, and then it's like, share it and want to see what it, how it goes in the world. Like our last episode with Jeremiah Sims is like the fastest any episode's been downloaded. It's kind of exciting. And then, but then that's done, right? And just like I'm assuming, like with you, like you have a song and you want to put it out in the world, and it's done, and but it's out there, and things are happening with it. But then it's like, the new project or the new episode, and like. Is that kind of like this, like, hey, I want to get this done, I want to do it right, but then I'm excited about this next thing that I'm going to do as well? Is that engaging in it?
Absolutely. Because you, again, as you're going through this process, because I'm sure even with the podcasting and getting it done correctly, some things may take a little longer than you would like, and you still feel like you're moving faster, but in the back of your mind, I'm thinking, okay, this effect or this mixing tool worked really well in this song. I bet it worked really well on the next one. And we start thinking about that one. So I'm sitting around playing the guitar, and I start playing that next one again and again and again and again and getting excited. And then I find myself having to kind of pull back the reins, like, okay, well, let's finish this one first.
Yeah.
And then, I used to get so hung up on even, I've only put out 6 songs. It's not as if I have a whole discography of.
Well, it's 6 more than most. So.
Well, but you I used to think I'm going to put this out in the world. People are either going to love it, they're going to hate it. I'm going to hear a lot of buzz about it. I'm going to get a lot of feedback, and that just hasn't really been the case. Really, I mean, there's been feedback, which has been great, both good and bad. Mm-hmm. But I've learned to kind of that whole, let it fly, let it be free, and then let it go. And that's it. You kind of move on from it, and I try to remove myself from it. And I find that process has become faster as well. And that makes it easier for me to concentrate on the work that we're doing as opposed to the results. I'm hoping the results will come, but let's just keep putting it out there and see what happens. But you're absolutely right about what's next. I can't help but think about that.
Then you think about like the contact point. So like the contact point for somebody in the future might be some song comes up and like, oh wow. And they listen to that. And then all of a sudden like, oh, there's a bunch of others. Like there's more. And like, getting that sort of momentum is like, now you have a bunch of contact points, which might show up in someone's algorithm on their musical service or whatever. And all of a sudden, like they get exposed to like, hey, I'm a Matt Mifflin fan, right? Which is pretty awesome,
Oh yeah. Yeah. And Jason has been pushing for that. And he's been great as far as pushing me to keep going and not get hung up on the last release or whatever it is. Just kind of, the more content we have out there, as you said, then, they could, especially with like a Spotify or something like that. I was listening to, or trying to find my latest release on Spotify. Well, in order to get to my most recent release, I had to listen to a song from Kid Cudi, Taylor Swift, blah, blah, blah. And that exposed me to that. I was like, oh, this is really cool. But I'm thinking, that poor person who's, jumping in the shower or driving in the car, like, oh man, I just want to hear some Kid Cudi. And then a Matthew Mifflin song pops up. But again, the more people you can reach, as you know, you never know. It's just a complete crapshoot.
Yeah. Well, and I was talking about we kind of like the spark of this conversation was thinking about another episode of the the Broken Record podcast, which I did episode on. That was previously my most popular episode. The Broken Record podcast has Rick Rubin and Malcolm Gladwell. They talk to artists, and the latest one was Rick Rubin talking with Robert Plant, which two like legends, right, in music. But like thinking about, and he's talking about the, you know, finding albums, and we're going to go into like that sort of thing, the music they had exposure to versus like, you know, having to go find it, select it. Like they'd have the radio, but the radio selections for a station were probably pretty narrow. There were some things with like pirate radio in the 60s with the boats that were in the English Channel, like broadcasting whatever. That's kind of rad.
Yeah.
That was like,
so
I was like thinking about
great movie.
That you have a curated, you know, there's curation around your music right now. Like if I want to listen to your music, there's like, oh, here's this branch of music that that is related to yours to go into. And I mean, I love that part of it, that you can get exposed to things. Even on Spotify, I have my Discover Weekly playlist, and I'll just throw that on. And it's kind of interesting to be like, huh, this is what they think I listen to. But it's like, all of a sudden, like there's something that comes on like, oh, that's pretty sweet. Like, and you like, you would never been exposed to that before. And so it's like, you get this opportunity to learn through what you've already selected, but then learning about these other things that are on the fringes and maybe a little bit different. Like, you ever heard the band Kaleo? Kaleo?
That's so funny that you'd say that. No, I have not. But I received a letter from Neva, our cousin, Nancy's daughter, of maybe it's Kaleo. Maybe it's where she's going in Greece, I think. Anyway, sorry, continue.
Oh, wow. Okay. Well, this is I want to make sure. Yeah. It's a rock band out of Iceland. But they play like this nasty, like guitar, like, and it's one of my favorite albums. I just like, and it just bangs all the way through it. And like, I was like, oh my gosh, but I would not have seen that except for, you know, that curation through Spotify and like getting that sort of, you know, there's so much selection out there, but there's also like, you know, all these areas of the world that music is like connected. And so like, you know, with music being so universal, and then thinking about teaching as well. And that's what kind of led me to want to have this conversation, throw some takes at you and see what you think. Okay.
Oh, bring it on. I love it. I love it. And I'm going to check that band out tonight, by the way.
Oh my God. Yeah. No good. Yeah. It's, oh my God. So good. I mean, yeah. Do we know that it's Kaleo AB is the album, and then the A/B, I think. Yeah. If I remember correctly.
/B.
Anyway, it's great. Anyone hasn't listed it out there, get on it. All right. So let's think about the parallels between creating music and teaching. So we talked about, like, you had some lessons from teaching. Like, that was one of our episodes where we talked about you know, teaching music lessons. What are the lessons that you had from teaching music? And then we talked about that. Now I want to think about creating music, and here's why. So I did an episode with Erica Halverson on this book, How the Arts Can Save Education, which is awesome. I'm now, just today, we did our first, we're calling it the Teach Forward Book Club. We've done a couple iterations, but we did our first session today on that book. And it talks about, she has this like arts-based education thing. They go into schools and do like student creation, and how that is like, can be like the central thing to like tie in education and really like build into, you know, competencies and like having students tell their stories and creating stuff. Anyway, it's like pretty cool. Like creations at the center. Right. And so they talk about the improv and how that it can be central to education. So my thing is, like, we're creating teaching, we're creating learning experiences, we're creating, kids are creating things, products of their own learning, or products that are evidence of their learning, or products that are learning and doing it, right? So in creating music, like, and even you just said before, you're learning how to mix, you're learning, maybe you've trip over on something where a mistake all of a sudden becomes, ooh, that sounds good. Like, that's pretty, you know, those sorts of things. And so thinking about that, I was thinking about, what are the ingredients for quality in creating music? And so I was thinking, like, what are parallels between that and ingredients for quality in teaching, right? So I was thinking, one, about bringing your context. And so, like, I'm thinking about some of the songs that you've talked about in the past. I mean, the context for some of those songs. Now, context being also, like, there's context for like the subject that you're bringing to, like, and some of them were like love songs, or some songs about, you know, I know you've had some hard times too, that those songs those contexts are being reflected, but also thinking about the context of your influences, like your musical influences and how you play. Like, how do you think context, bringing your context, how do you think that flies in with your own music creation?
Oh man. Well, as far as the music creation stuff goes, I do believe that the initial idea comes from somewhere deep inside. I believe it's a subliminal something, that either it's a certain chord that you play while you're just sitting around playing, or a combination of one chord to the next, or a melody, or whatever it is that brings out those emotions. For me personally, it's the music that draws out the emotions that then leads to the lyrics. But I do think that, I mean, gosh, and it's so funny you say context, because the name of my album is No Context.
That's right, yeah.
Which was, of course, made at Andy and Kristen's place in Milwaukee. We came up with that name, kind of tongue in cheek. Yeah. But it does, in fact, and you've talked about, as we all have, experience these different things in life, the ups and downs, and blah, blah, blah. And you do try to capture those as a songwriter. But I do feel like if I come into a session, or if I just come in and sit down and play the guitar and kind of thinking about writing something new, if I try to force that context into what I'm doing, it's not going to work. It just doesn't, something doesn't translate for me personally. I feel like with music and everything, just being creative, I feel like even when we're being creative, we are pulling or grabbing from something that's already within, and I feel like we are kind of releasing that into what we are doing and what we're creating and what we're trying to achieve ultimately. Yeah.
So,
I mean,
like the emotion. So, I mean, you just talked about the emotion, and like the creation kind of brings that out. And then you're then basically taking a representation of your emotions into the world through the music. Right. And so thinking too, that also like, and maybe we're getting a little hoo-ha or a little spiritual, but I mean, I think teaching is also the same thing, where there's some sort of like, this is a representation of something that I'm trying to, I am passionate about teaching. I am passionate about my relationships. I am passionate about even my content area. And like, I am putting something out there into the world, and knowing that we do, I mean, like when you do that, you want it received well. I mean, you can't say like, I'm going to put all this emotion into a creation, put it out into the world, and if it's not received well, you'll be like, well, I'm okay with that. Well, it probably still is like, I want to share this with people. I want people to see it. And same thing for like, that there is this emotion in teaching, like I'm sharing a piece of myself with the world, and you want to have a quality experience for those that are on the receiving end of it. So the context is important.
And I think that's huge. And that's where, even as you're talking about it, I mean, students of all ages, of all categories, whether it's math, science, music, history, they can feel that when you do have that passion for it, and you do, you put a lot into what you're doing, and you're feeling what you're doing. And I feel like, of course, that helps with the reception, and to say, oh yeah, I do like it. But I think it also drives the students to want to grasp it that much more when it's presented in a way that you can tell that someone is, genuinely interested and genuinely trying to present it to you in the way that they have interpreted it. And I think that just goes a really long way. I mean, it makes it exciting for the students, I think, when they see that you are willing to take a different route, or I just think just as we're talking now, I think about even just teaching music, when you come from a different angle, it just opens up this whole side of the brain that welcomes new information that is being fed to them in a different way. I think that's exciting. I think that's exciting for the student and the teacher.
So I got an episode coming out where my friend Jeff, he does puzzles. So he loves thinking about puzzles. And so like, they're like Japanese style of like logic puzzles. So they're not really any words with them, but they're different kind. They're kind of Sudoku-ish, but they're not like that, but kind of look like it with like a grid. Anyway, he talked about the act of creating a puzzle is, and wanting it to be inviting for someone to engage in. And so even there where you think like, well, it's just a puzzle, but it's like how you could engage it. And then even thinking the teaching side, like you said, coming in at it from a different angle would be like, not even given the rules and be like, well, what do you think the rules are? What do you think the goal is? And then like, well, what would make it kind of a cool looking puzzle? So it invites someone to want to engage. And like all of a sudden, like all these different facets are coming into it that students, and before we even think about a solution yet, but like, it's like, but there is there's a giver, a creator, a receiver, like all in that. And then the fun part is engaging in the process together where, you know, I could imagine you're probably having some stories of like, where you and Jason are like going back and forth and thinking about, well, what if we do this? What if we do this? And even when you hit publish, there probably still is like, well, there could be another version. Too,
yeah. Oh well. Yeah, for sure. But
yeah.
You said that wonderfully. Yeah. Cause it is, you know, when you're working with one other person or 30 other people, if you guys are all into it, you know, and you're willing to accept different ways, different thoughts, different processes, that just makes everyone better. So in turn, everyone's learning. You know, the teacher is no longer the teacher, you know, and the student is no longer the student. The student has become the teacher, the old, you know, thank you, grasshopper, you know, stuff like that. But that's where it gets really exciting. And that's where we, you know, I think that's where, you know, we learn and we just get better. And it's so exciting to see.
So in this episode of the Broken Record podcast with Robert Plant, he talked about his some of the influences, and he talked about how there was, you know, the influence obviously of, you know, the Beatles and having bands, and like everyone around them was having bands, but then having, you know, hearing what the rock bands were bringing and what they could hear on the radio. Right. But then there was blues artists being played over the radio too, or they get records and things about blues artists. So like, you know, blues artists from like where I'm sitting right now in North Mississippi Hill Country were like very popular over in England. And like then you talking about some of the same artists that were maybe up in Chicago too, like Buddy Guy, Muddy Waters, and like Howling Wolf, and like R.L. Burnside was pretty popular down here, like some cool stuff. But like, you hear the influence of those early blues artists in the rock bands, but then also at the same time, they talk about Bob Dylan and like the folk aspect. And then you listen to like Led Zeppelin and like the lyrics and the melody, like the lyrics that were happening there. But then at the same time, like some of the guitar work that was happening, and you see like their context was also these musical influences that they had, that they were just like soaking up through these like pirate radio stations and the records that they could get their hands on. And I mean, and again, they had to do a lot more effort than we do to try and acquire some of that music, but they were bringing all that to their creation. And so like, I was wondering for you, like if you had to think like, what musical influences are you bringing to that creation? Like, what would you say?
You know, what's funny is I will listen to songs I'm either recording or have already been published and released. And I'll listen to them and we'll get done with them. And I kind of stop listening to it for a while. And then I'll just be driving around and put it on Spotify, or I'll even put it on the radio here in Springfield, Illinois, which plays the same 30 songs every day, all day. That's but right. It's like, you know, I'll have a song and I'll hear it and think, you know, this was an influence for this song. Yeah. It could be something from Stone Temple Pilots back in 1996, or it could be something from James Taylor, or, you know, it goes all over. And it truly, I mean, it's just like, oh my God, I didn't even know I was doing it. You know, I don't think there's many songwriters, you know, maybe there was back then and maybe there's some are now. I mean, for me personally, I am not, on purpose anyway. Those influences kind of ooze out, and they just pop their head up, you know, and for me, I don't even realize it till after the fact, but that influence has been laid, that foundation has been laid, and you don't even know it's happening, but it's happening, you know, as far as, and it's crazy. I mean, it really, just on the way to work this morning, I can't remember who it was. Maybe it was a song by like the Eels or something like that, you know, and I heard it and I was like, oh my gosh, I can totally hear where I have heard that many times before, and it somehow came out in this song that I was working on that I never once thought, you know, I'm going to write something like the Eagles today. Or I'm going to, like, you know, it's amazing how it just gets in there, and it's crazy. Yeah.
Well, that's, I mean, and that's what I was telling you. I wanted to talk to you about the blues too, because it's just, again, there's a record producer down here, Fat Possum Records, and they do, like, their whole existence was to like make sure that these North Mississippi Hill Country blues artists, Junior Kimbrough and R.L. Burnside, and like these guys, like their music is like put out into the world. Well, I was, again, on the previous Broken Record podcast I did, where I talked about the Black Keys, and they had a song, like it was one of their first songs that they'd ever recorded. And I was like, oh my God, like it was just like some, was it Dan Auerbach, like his guitar playing, and then, got Pat Carney, his drum. And it was just like, kind of grooving. And it was like, oh my gosh, this is so good. Well, I got, during the pandemic, I had sent End of All Music, which is our local record store, which used to be associated with Fat Possum. It's really closely associated, but I mean, anyway, it used to be the same people that owned it. Anyway, they had a pressing of an old R.L. Burnside album that he'd recorded in like the 70s that they're like sending out with like, I would order some records and they would, it was during the pandemic, so you couldn't go in the store, and they just send you a bunch of records back. And one of them was this recording of R.L. Burnside. I'm like, I didn't listen to any of this, but it'd be kind of interesting. The guy's local. Put it on. And it's like, there's the same song that the Black Keys are playing. It's right there. I'm like, oh my God. And like, and you heard them and that was their first record label was Fat Possum. And it's like, they're bringing this context to their creation and they're putting their own spin on it, but they're not going to ignore that is exactly the influences that have had. The Black Keys bringing their context was the blues and bringing that. And so thinking about like, the musical context, the things that people are bringing is, I mean, same thing as like the influences that you're bringing to your teaching, because there is an influence there. There is the influence of the things that you've seen before, the things that you've explored, the experiences you've had, the resources you've been exposed to. And so the same thing is like, not to apologize for it, but it's a part of you, making sure like almost like they're like assets, and like thinking like I have experience, like just like Led Zeppelin or Robert Plant, like Bob Dylan was an influence, and these blues artists were an influence, and thinking about and the way that all these other bands around them and were influencing who they are. And so they became this amazing assembly of like people that had all these, and just thinking of, and anytime you have John Bonham in your band, you're probably doing okay too. So
period. Yes. Great point.
But so that was one ingredient for quality, was bringing your context. Another one was bringing your skills. And obviously you have to, be skilled in order to, create music. But one thing I did want to connect to with teaching is that you didn't just, I think I would say you're gifted as a guitar player, but you worked at it. You had, that wasn't just like pick it up and go. Like you had to work at it. And like, there is this idea of like, you have to be skilled in order to actually create good music. And so that involves working on your craft. And that is just like teaching. You need to work on your craft. And that involves not just experience, because I'm assuming you probably had lots of experience where you just, you could be doing the same thing over and over again, not getting any better. But like, how do you, and I wonder, how did you do that, Matt? Like, how did you reflect and get better at your craft of actually, creating music?
Well, going back to the influences thing, you hear other musicians playing, I can remember playing, and I could do a G, D, and C and an A major chord, no problem, but you start seeing and hearing these other players that are moving up and down the neck. And it's like, well, okay, I want to do that. So that opens up that door. And then you really start to tackle that and get into it and kind of push yourself. I think that's where it comes. I think I've met a lot of players that are very skilled. They can play all day long, but they can kind of do the same thing all day long. You have to want to kind of step outside the lines or pay closer to attention to whether it be the blues or some, prog rock or some progressive jazz or something like that to open up that part of your mind to be not only willing to accept it, but also to accept it, digest it, and then try to not imitate it, but, kind of run alongside it for a while to kind of see what it's all about. And as you said, that teachers, it's the same exact thing. I really, you have to be willing to learn at all times. You have to have your ears and your eyes open to get better in anything, I believe. Yeah,
that really awesome. And this goes probably to how to, stick with music. You're getting up there. been a lot of years though in music, you know, like you thinking
about. Right. Okay.
Well, no, it's same thing with, but to stick with it though, like you probably wouldn't stick with that same guy that can do the same thing over and over again, probably not playing as often as you are because it's the same thing over and over again. And like, he's impressive at parties maybe, but like, and that's where the kick is, but versus like, no, I want to incorporate this new idea, this new element, this new thing into it. And so like, I mean, in the podcast, they talked about, you know, they went to Africa or Morocco. Robert Plant did, and like, you know, heard some things, and like the song Kashmir came from those experiences and like hearing some new things. Then you hear about like Paul Simon's influences from going to different places. And I think Graceland was a total like all this polyrhythmic and sort of influence that he brought into his music. And it's like those advance their skills. And so then that can advance the creativity that's happening within it. And same thing for teachers. Absolutely. Like they got to keep doing that. Right.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And those experiences trigger things. And yeah, you just, even with my students that I have now and have had over the years, if you give them one or two pieces to work on for the week, sure, they may practice their 15 or 20 minutes a day. But if you come from a different angle and say, hey, here's let's say we're going to do Late in the Evening by Paul Simon. I want to show you this little song, and you can play it like this. And by having something new and interesting, it makes you want to sit down and play and practice or look at your lesson plans, or just to, you really get into it when you start to, again, see it and hear it from different artists and teachers and things. And it's very motivating and inspiring.
Yeah. So I wonder, like, what does it look like? So like the marriage of like, these two influences that come together and think like, oh, what does that look like together? Like, I know one of your favorite bands is Humphreys McGee, right? And so like,
yes, big shout out Humphreys McGee.
Yeah. So what do you think their influences are? Maybe you even know.
I think it's a hodgepodge of things. I think and that's what makes them so exciting to me. And that's where, they can do all kinds of different stuff. And that's where we, at Phrygian Frog, or myself as an artist, I do not want to do the same kind of thing for every song. I want to just stay outside of the box, just enough where, it's exciting for someone to say. Just the other day, like, he was saying, man, I really like your upbeat songs, like the slower songs, they're okay. But like, if you thought about doing like a funk song, like something like that. And he goes, it'd be really cool if we could hear like a punk, funk, reggae song. And I was like, boom, like, whoa, that does sound really cool. So I found myself that night trying to put something together.
Oh, that's awesome.
In those genres, and it was so good for me as a player to try to weave those in and out. And it really, and it was exciting for me. I mean, God, I think I played for a couple hours that night, just on that idea alone. It was so exciting, and to try to grab a hold of something that is just flying around everywhere, and trying to just get it to a point where not only where I can understand it, but also present it to people or students, or, so they can understand it as well, and it just was very exciting.
Well, I think too, like so then that leads right into bringing your creativity. Right. And so like, seeing that's like that's a really complicated problem, and I don't know if I want to solve it, like, versus like, oh, this is and what I call those is messy tasks, right? It's a messy task. Like, what does that sound like? I'm like, oh, let's think about that. Versus, I have these open-ended tasks that I'll use with my, students in mathematics, and not as exciting maybe as the reggae funk thing, but, but still, but what the instrument is, I think, is like a classroom. And Friday, I'm going into 2 different classrooms. I got this lesson that I want to see, but there's going to be 2, like the instrument is like the classroom, and thinking about how are they going to react to this lesson, and how can I, get at the learnings and the objectives that we're supposed to do, and how can I basically play this room, and not from in my sort of teaching is not going to look like I'm going to stand up at the board and do a bunch of stuff, because that's not engaging. That's not embraced. We're going to do some activities where it's open-ended, and they get to like tell some stories with the math and like do some other things. It's going to be wild, but it's going to be like, I can't wait. Like, I'm excited. And I got teachers that are willing to have me come to their room and do that. And so that's sort of like open-endedness to the process, or even like, probably with you, when maybe you're jamming with somebody and like, oh, we're playing off of each other, and like how that sort of works. And even hearing the stories of Robert Plant having John Bonham all of a sudden going to some sort of like he's jamming on the drums. All of a sudden he goes into like a waltz beat just to like throw him off and just be like, hey, what you going to do now? And like having that sort of play on creativity, but you can't do that if you don't bring what your influences, what your skills, and that allows you to play. Like if you don't have those other stuff, you can't, that limits the amount of space that you can play around in, it seems like.
Wow. That was really good, Joel.
I told you, I heard that podcast. I'm like, I texted you while I'm listening to the podcast. So I'm walking the dog. I got the poop bag in one hand. I'm texting with the other hand. And I'm like, I want to talk about this stuff. Cause it's like, I don't think people see, too many, there's like the Ferris Bueller's Day Off where Ben Stein's up there, Bueller, something DOO economic. And like teaching does not have to be like that. It can be this, like, it's an art. It is an art. And like,
oh, it's absolutely.
It's an art.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And see, and the way that you're talking and what you're talking about gets me excited. Like I wish I could be in that classroom or one of those two classrooms on Friday and to see how it goes. But you're absolutely right with a messy task. I mean, that's where everything that you've touched on comes into play. And that's where it is this, oftentimes when I'm teaching or even going back to Humphreys McGee, they talk about song parts or parts just being Legos, and kind of stacking them together and eventually building this nice big building, which I was terrible at Legos, but just little pieces, little parts when they're all put together, it's so exciting. And then for you to have the opportunity to show people that, show students that, or, in my case, release something and try to show them what you're doing, that is so exciting. And I think in the classroom setting, you cannot stand up at a chalkboard, man, when you've got your ideas. And that's where I mean, you're blowing my mind right now just thinking about parallels there between music and teaching. And it is, you have to be willing to push it. You got to push the boundaries a little bit, and I think not only for the students or the listeners, but for yourself. If you are stagnant, and we talk about the guy who sits around and plays the same thing all day, you're not improving. It's not exciting. You're not going to want to sit down and do it. It's going to become mundane, and it's just not going to be at its best. And, and it's just, it's very interesting. I mean, very cool stuff, man.
Well, that's what I mean. And two, if we brace that, then we know that, you can't, with just really going to parallels with teaching, like, you hand somebody a guitar and say, get good at this guitar. And then like, like a curriculum would be like a curriculum change. Like, all right, I'm taking this away. Here's a clarinet. Like, well, you weren't good at the guitar. Like, here's a clarinet, do this. And like, you keep doing that. Versus like, if it is an art form, let me get good at the art, right? Don't change all the ingredients in the band all the time. So I can like really hone in on something. So like when tests get changed, standard gets changed, like give some foundation, right? And then once you do, like now, because we bring our context, our skills, our creativity, and then, being able to build on that into something that's sustaining. And that brings me to, I got two other things, ingredients for longevity. And so I said, one of the things is trusting your group, right? So like with, talked about the kind of thing with John Bonham changing up the drum beat, or actually walking off stage sometimes, like, they're like, we got to do something acoustic. No, like having that, or like, having something like that where, even though if it's crazy, I still trust him. He's going to come back, or two, like they trusted not, like Bonham trusted everyone else. Like they're good enough to keep it going, and I can go get a drink and come back or whatever, And same thing for your people, like having, teaching was like trusting in your peers around you to give you good feedback, trusting in like my students. Like I have to trust them that they're bringing their asses to the table. Not that I don't trust my students. I got to be careful with here, because you're handing over some of your instruction to students and engaging in this messy task. And like, you just have to know, like, they're good stuff is going to come out of that. I'm going to trust that process, that like them engaging together with a good task that I put in front of them and me create an environment for them to do it. I'm going to trust that good stuff's going to happen, that I can then extract some things and build on something with the group. Or else trusting even administration that, hey, give me space to do this thing. It's going to be loud. It's going to be a little unorthodox, but it's going to be beautiful if you just give me the chance. Right. But like, and I can't imagine the, you know, given you've put out 6 songs already, like you and Jason, you know, you're kind of handing over babies and saying like, hey, here's this thing that I've created, and now help me to shape it into something better. Like, I don't know, like, how is that, like, building up that trusting a relationship is got to be something there.
It was hard at first, definitely. And I had known him before we started doing this whole thing. But and again, with me sitting on these songs for 7 years, which, you know, and I'd play them for people, and I thought I was pretty proud of them. So yeah, it was tough for me at first. But again, we did build that trust. And along with that trust became open lines of communication. I could say without worrying about hurting Jason's feelings, or vice versa, hey, I'm not really sure if that works right here. Maybe we could try a couple of things. I'm a big drum guy. And Jason, he'll laugh when he listens to this, but like, you know, I don't know about that snare on beat 2. Can we bump it to 4? And then we'll just, you know, maybe sneak one in on the 1. And he'll say like, well, we changed it last week, but you know, we can change it again. And he's willing to do that. But that's where that trust, it definitely took some time for me to build it up. And I think that's where, you know, when you do get results that you're ultimately aiming for, that builds that trust even more. Like, okay, we are doing something right here. You know, whatever, you know, another teacher, another peer had suggested, wow, that really worked. Maybe I could go back and touch base on this or future projects, or whatever the case may be. But yeah, having that trust is huge, as you said. I mean, it kind of takes out the whole, I mean, for me, the paranoia factor. I mean, I definitely was like, oh, people going to like this? Is this going to go over? Are they going to learn from this? So, you know, it kind of having that voice of reason kind of there to at least bounce some ideas off of is huge, you know?
Yeah. Well, like having that, that I love the bounce, because like, you know, so one thing a teacher will do is isolate, right? They'll get in their job, they'll isolate, and they'll think, I've got all the problems. I've got all the solutions to my own problems. I don't want to expose people that I have needs, maybe. So there's maybe some insecurity there too. And so they silo themselves, and they say, so like the ingredients for longevity is like, you got to be open and vulnerable a little bit to somebody. And then again, building up trust in a safe place. But like, I would not have been where I am today without my friend Shane, who I've been talking to now, almost 20 years every week. But I mean, when we were teaching together at Sauk Prairie High School, it was, hey, I'm going to try. I'd run down. It's probably just like you with a new song, like run down, like, I'm going to try this in my class. And I'd be like, you want to try it? He's like, no, I don't, but tell me how it goes. And I'd try to be like, oh man, it was awful. Like, I'm going to tweak it like this. You want to try it? And he's like, no, but tell me how it goes. And then like the next year he would take on some of the things like, oh, that's the refined version of what the crazy stuff you were doing. Now it's a honed in version. I'm going to do it now. And he put his own twist on it, but it would be back and forth and seeing how we would be doing and playing off of each other. But having, again, that trust in your group, whatever it is, like all the different layers of it, and knowing that, hey, it's all if we all have the same common goal, either it's learning of students or if it's to create a good song that people can connect to, like that's a beautiful thing, those relationships, in order to get in that creative process.
Yes. Yeah. And they're everything. And I recently was listening to an interview with Dave Grohl, who he's kind of said the same thing.
Gosh, yeah.
The God. But he talked about how he made that first album all by himself and did all the instruments and things like that. But he's like, you know, I needed other minds, other ears, other input to make this. You know, I wanted to be in a band where you go about trusting people and just, you know, hey, what if I try this little lick here? You know, like, you're like, I don't know about that, but you know, maybe we'll revisit it. And then they come back and you know, it just happens to fit. But just having that bounce back, bounce off. You know, I mean, I just think it's so huge for growing in that way. And just for a guy like him who could put out 10 albums by himself all day, gosh. You know, no question about it. But for even him, I mean, so when he said that, I was kind of like, you know, wow. And that's what we've done these recordings. You know, I play all the instruments on my home recordings, but then I send them to Jason and we bring in a live drummer, and then Jason plays the bass, and they just do something different than, you know, I would go right down the middle, just trying to present it right down the middle, and they can kind of veer off a little bit and try something a little different. And we're like, wow, that's great. That adds so much to what we're doing here.
Right. And so like, I mean, the thing that I always say together or all the time is, and something I didn't get, I got it from my colleagues who did this amazing book called Smarter Together. We are, and just know it like, hey, we are smarter together. And so like thinking about the creative process, like, you know, Dave Grohl on his own create an amazing album, but then I would say the music after where he's like got people to play with and get creative with, like, that's even better. Same thing for teachers. Like, again, you can come up with some amazing stuff on your own, but it's not as good as you're going to get when you start bringing others into the group. And so that's great. So speaking of bringing other people, so Robert Plant, obviously the famous collaboration he's had lately is with Alison Krauss. And so, which is amazing, beautiful music. And so thinking about another ingredient of longevity, and we kind of talked about this already a little bit with like bringing in these other influences, but, and so those become a part of your context. As soon as you bring it in, it's part of your context now, but you have to go seek them out, right? You got to go seek out these opportunities, and people like, and Dave Grohl is a good example too. Like the Sound City documentary where he's like on the, and he's just bringing in collaborators from, you know, Rick Springfield to Paul McCartney, to Trent Reznor, all these people. It's like amazing music they're just putting together. But like all these influences coming in together, there's new techniques. Well, it was a funny story that Robert Plant shared on the podcast where he was, first started working with Alison Krauss, and they sing beautiful harmonies together. Well, when he first started, he didn't harmonize with anybody. Like he had, I think John Paul from Led Zeppelin would like do some la la la's or something, like, but it was just basically him singing. He never had anyone harmonizing. So he could almost like do jazz. He could go off the riff and make it a little bit different. But like Alison Krauss is like, what are you doing? Like, we can't harmonize if I don't know what you're doing. Like, we gotta, he's like, oh yeah, I never thought of that. Like, he was like 60 years old and they hadn't thought about that. It's amazing. Like, but like it added something to his repertoire. And so looking out for new techniques and influences, like to be on the lookout in order to like expand who you are as, and for him, a musician, a singer versus like, you know, who you are as a teacher. And I just had a conversation with a teacher in my department where, again, she started doing these open-ended sort of things like, this is how I need to teach. Cause if I don't do it this way, and it was a completely different end to like her at the board and writing definitions down. And she's like, no, I got to do it this way. And this is pretty exciting. And again, going back to that, it's a creative process, right? So like those new techniques and things. So what's something like recently that you've added to your repertoire? Or wait, first a second, before you answer that, what do you think? Does that help with longevity? Like adding in these new techniques and influences?
Oh, absolutely. You got to keep it fresh for not only yourself, but the people who you're working with, whether you're teaching them or you're writing songs with them. I think it just helps you grow exponentially. I think everything that you've talked about, absolutely. These things all, and they're all in us, whether we want to talk about it or not. As we talked about, those influences are there. I mean, if you are open to learning from them, it just, you know, we're smarter together.
Yeah.
There's no doubt about it.
What's a new group you've been, any new groups you've been listening to, or new artists or anything?
I've really
or new to you. It doesn't have to be completely new.
Of course, like the Tyler Childers stuff. You know, I'm really enjoying some of that stuff, and trying to, and that in turn has caused me to play more finger style, kind of finger picking kind of things, and kind of tone it down a little bit. As far as, I can't really pinpoint a whole lot. I've been trying to get outside of what I've been doing, so I'm getting like the randoms.
I'll throw things at you every now and then. Like I'll throw in the Avett Brothers. I threw them at you.
Did
you ever get into any Sturgill Simpson?
Oh yes, I did.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
And again, and then I'll write something and I'll record it and I'll forget about it and I'll go back and listen to it 2 weeks later and it's like, holy crap, this sounds like Sturgill Simpson, or this sound, you know, without even thinking about it. It's like, well, this sounds kind of country, or, you know, country alternative or whatever.
Yeah.
And that's where it gets really exciting for me when I'm able to look back, as I've said, and I can hear it. And then listening back to myself and thinking, wow, that crept in there and I didn't even know it. I was not aware of it. I was not writing it on purpose, and it just was there.
Yeah. And and again, going back to this product, like my clinical instructor, Joe Dye, would talk about, like, you know, he just steals everything because to become a better teacher, like he sees what other teachers are doing, just like with what kind of we're talking about, not stealing, but like, these influences that are coming all around you, and how, and he would use those to become a better teacher. But you see, like, the music that I love to listen to now, and you think about all the different influences that have fed into it, and there was big movements from, thinking about like back when the Beatles like blew up. And then you think about when Bob Dylan, brought in kind of the Irish folk sort of thing into New York. And then that went back to England, and then the blues went to England, and then the British invasion came. And then now we have like, rock into country. And then like even when Nirvana came out, and all these sorts of different influences like come together, and it's like, music is pretty awesome. And you think it's like kind of like this connection. You can see all these different influences together, but then knowing that too, we see some of those same things happening in the classroom as well, where these influences are coming together. And it's all trying to help students learn now in its best form, when it's not being stripped down, when the creativity is not being stolen from teachers. Like, you see some amazing things that people have accumulated and being able to accomplish in the classroom. And so, I don't know, I love music, and I love thinking about it. I love the fact that you're willing to come on here and jam with me about these. See what I'm like. I got some takes for you, Matt, and see
you got me excited, man. You really, I think it's great what you're doing, and just your ideas. I mean, and just a parallel, really, you've opened my eyes to that. And I was doing both of them for 10 years. I was writing music and teaching lessons, and I didn't really put it together, and you're absolutely right, though. I mean, really, it's a beautiful thing, and around we go. And you just, right. as long as you are willing to kind of pay attention and learn and listen, the possibilities are endless. It's really, that's the exciting thing for me.
Awesome. So, all right, so what's going on? What do we got? So you mentioned the songs that are coming out now. Let's make sure to promote what you got going, and we'll put links in the show notes to everything that Matt's got going with regards to music. But let's now I'm going to give you the floor here. Sure.
Well, starting back, I think we had talked about maybe
Suncrest, yes.
Or out of the clouds, maybe. But since then, we have released The Pace, which is a little more upbeat, kind of a rocker kind of thing, with a nice little piano and cello part in there, played by Jason Waddell, it's very nice. And then we did This Too Shall Pass, which was, I hate to call it my pandemic song, but it definitely was my pandemic song. I mean, it was, and I actually wrote that intro. The guitar part, I can remember while sitting in the bathroom while Gracie was in the tub, and I remember doing that. And I remember recording and sending it to a friend. And just to go back to our influences and stuff, I said, who does this sound like? Is this already a song? And my buddy was like, no, I don't think so. But it kind of sounds like, I can't remember what he said. But, there's always that worry as a songwriter, like, has this already been done? Did it creep in there subliminally? So that one's out there. Nice vocal harmonies, kind of a chill song. That one was really fun to make. And then we have Better Safe Than Sorry that we just released last week, that this is our first promotion that we're doing for it, but kind of letting it sit for a little bit. Nice. And that kind of comes with releasing numerous songs at this point, whereas with the first song, I was all over it. We did a promotional video, we did all this kind of stuff. And it's kind of, for this one, like, let's just let it sit there for a little while. And we've already started working on the next one. But Better Safe Than Sorry was a song that I wrote probably in about 20 minutes, about 7 years ago. After, my now ex-wife, we were dating at the time. It was one of the many times she broke up with me. And I thought, you know what, maybe I'm better safe than sorry. I should just get out of this. And of course I did not, and I wouldn't change that for the world. But that song was really fun to make, very straightforward. And Jason and I both had a lot of fun. And it was our first, we put in a shaker and a tambourine on this latest one, which are played by yours truly. But Jason plays the bass, and we got Chris Gunn on the drums, and it's something that we're pretty proud of. And we're just going to continue to roll them out. We really are doing a lot of things. Phrygian Frog has some great YouTube videos, educational videos, as far as production and mixing and things like that I definitely suggest people check out if you're into the production mixing side of music. Jason does a great job of explaining things. Of course, he teaches this stuff, but just very, even I understand it. so it's just he lays it out there for you so you can really digest it, which is really cool. But again, man, I mean, I just pulled out my old computer, as I told you, and took a little flash drive and pulled off about 12 songs off of that. Again, these are from, probably as recent as a couple years ago. I've since upgraded to a newer computer, which has been wonderful, I must say. But so now I'm putting all those songs onto my new computer and kind of going back and revisiting those things along with the new stuff I'm writing. And the new stuff I'm writing, I mean, goes anywhere from your Stohill Simpson to Pat Metheny to, it's fun for me to think about releasing songs now, knowing that my ultimate goal is to not be pigeonholed, is to not write a certain kind of music. And Jason has given me the liberty to, write whatever you want, write a metal song, it doesn't matter. We want to be outside the box, and that's been really, really fun for me. And without this music and the songwriting, I mean, it truly is therapeutic for me, and it's very exciting and motivating. And I'm just so thankful to be able to do it. And I just think a lot of good things are coming.
Nice. Yeah. Well, I mean, I know how much joy I got out of around a holiday and you'd bring a guitar out and just start, just jamming on it and doing just a bunch of different things. I'm like, one of the things that I'm finding out about my personality, and obviously from this podcast experience, is like, I don't want to I'm enjoying it, but I'm like, man, other people would enjoy this too, and so wanting to share with, I'm so glad that you're out there, that you're sharing things with others, and you're getting to put this stuff that you've, like you said, for 7 years, you've been sitting on some of these songs, and like the fact that you get to release them in the world. I'm so happy for you, Matt. I'm so glad. And again, as the musical director of the Ammon on Planet podcast, we are so excited to be partnering with you, and also to get a chance to talk every now and then. And you get to, and unfortunately, you get to be my outlet from all my hot takes on music and teaching together. But they're coming in a lot. So, but anyway, I appreciate you, Matt. Thanks for coming on, and we look forward to the next conversation.
Thank you, Joel. It's always a pleasure, man. You're great. Keep doing the great work, and we're all proud of you, buddy.
Thanks. All right, there it is. Again, all over the place, but you know what? It's one of the reasons I love this podcast is like having an opportunity to share some things, and maybe I'm like, well, that was kind of scattered, or maybe you're like, hey, that was cool. It was cool having a conversation about getting excited about something, seeing the parallels with teaching. Matt's passionate about music, Joel's passionate about teaching, and they both are helping each other advance in their understanding of what it means to be a creator. And so there you go. That's the conversation. So show notes for this episode, links to Matt's music will be in the show notes for this episode, which can be found at ammononplanet.com/episode 68. And you can also find music to any, or links to any other references. So the episode that we had with Erica Halverson will be there on how the arts can save education. That's a great episode if you're thinking about this connection between creativity and teaching, and how to tap into those and be an outlet for those students that might not be reached in more traditional methods. And, and I always hate saying traditional method is like, there's like this regular track. Why we're moving the track. The track is moving so that, maybe that this tapping into creativity is the traditional way to teach. That's the vision. That's the vision for going forward. Anyway, I digress. Links to the episode can be found at, that have been mentioned in this episode can be found at ammononplanet.com/episode 68. Lots of stuff from Phrygian Frog there. Lots of stuff in Matthew Mifflin there. And then also, if you're looking for other ways to support, you can subscribe, rate, and review the podcast. Whenever you do that, you are bringing some attention to maybe some other folks that want to have conversations or hear conversations like the one you just heard. And also, if you know of somebody like, hey, you know what, maybe someone needs to hear this, go ahead and share the episode. That's a great way to get exposure as well. And also, it's a way to show that you caring about somebody, that like, hey, I think you'd get a kick out of hearing this episode. Even if they don't listen to it, it's still kind of like, hey, I'm thinking about you sort of thing. So anyway, just saying. You can also find us on all the socials at Ammon on Planet. So LinkedIn, Instagram, Twitter, whatever you're on. And we usually put out, if we have a new episode, there's usually some sort of notice on some of those. We're also, there's also a Facebook page that you can like or follow, whatever it is there. And if you're looking for other ways to support the podcast, you can go to the Ammon on Planet store or Ammon on Planet bookshop. Links to those can be found at the footer at ammononplanet.com. and all the proceeds from purchases that you make, anything that we get, go to support the production costs of the podcast. So, I know I saw Daniel out there was purchasing some sweatshirts and some t-shirts, and I really appreciate that because those proceeds go to support the podcast. So thank you, Daniel. All right, so thank you for listening to this episode of the Animal Planet podcast. Thanks to Matt Mifflin for the music in this episode and for sharing his time. We also want to say thank you, that we get to use his music before and after every episode. We love it. Finally, thank you to all of you out there who are seeking to teach better and be the good in the world by investing in the lives of others. This world is a better place because you have decided to use the gifts you have been given to serve others. Thank you for all that you do. Peace.